I stand next to my daughter before we leave, and I show her a map spread open on the table. I tell her that we are traveling to Beijing, the capital city of China, a country in East Asia with one of the longest continuous histories in the world. I point to Beijing on the map and explain that this city has been an important center of power, culture, and daily life for thousands of years. My daughter looks at the map for a long moment and asks if the city still remembers its past. I tell her that Beijing remembers its past not only through buildings, but through the way people use space. We get on the plane together, and I describe how travel feels like leaving one rhythm and slowly entering another. My daughter looks out the window and says the clouds make everything feel quiet. I tell her that when we arrive, the city will speak first through its streets and open spaces. She says she wants to listen carefully, and I tell her that is the best way to travel. When we arrive, we are already outside, feeling the air of Beijing. I describe how the city feels wide and grounded, as if it was designed to hold many people at once. My daughter looks around and says the sky feels bigger here. I explain that Beijing was planned as a capital, and that space was used to show balance and importance. We begin walking, letting the city guide us. I tell my daughter that Beijing does not rush its history indoors. Much of it lives outside. She notices how broad the streets are and asks why they feel so open. I explain that in traditional Chinese city planning, openness represented order and stability. Our first stop is the open park around the Temple of Heaven. I tell my daughter that emperors once came here to pray for good harvests. She asks why harvests were so important, and I explain that food meant survival for the whole country. We stand near the round buildings, and she looks up and asks why they are shaped that way. I explain that the circle represents the sky, and that people believed harmony came from respecting nature. She says it feels like the building is talking to the sky. I tell her that architecture here often carries quiet messages. We walk deeper into the park, and the city sounds soften. My daughter notices people moving slowly and asks what they are doing. I explain that many people come here to practice Tai Chi every morning. She watches the slow movements and says it looks peaceful but strong. I tell her that balance is not about speed, but about control. She tries copying one movement and smiles, saying it feels calm. Later, we walk along open paths toward the summer palace. I explain that emperors came here to rest and enjoy nature. My daughter looks at the lake and says it feels like the city disappears. I tell her that the palace was designed to blend buildings with water and hills. She asks if people still come here for the same reason. I explain that now it belongs to everyone, and people come here to walk, think, and slow down. We walk along the long outdoor corridor, and my daughter points to the painted beams above us. She asks why the paintings are everywhere. I explain that these paintings tell stories from history and legend, so even walking becomes learning. She says it feels like walking inside a moving picture book. I tell her that learning does not always need walls. In the afternoon, we explore a hutong, walking slowly through narrow outdoor streets. I explain that hutongs are old neighborhoods where families lived close together. My daughter notices people sitting outside and talking. She asks if they are neighbors, and I tell her that these streets were built for shared life. She says it feels friendly and alive. I explain that history lives strongest where people still talk, cook, and play outside. We stop near a small, open square where older men are playing xiangqi, Chinese chess. My daughter watches quietly and asks why they look so serious. I explain that the game reflects old ideas about strategy and patience. She asks if games can teach people how to think. I tell her that many traditional games were designed exactly for that. The next day, we travel to the mountains and stand on the Great Wall. I explain that the wall was built to protect the country over many generations. My daughter looks at the stones and asks if people really carried them by hand. I explain that many people worked here, often under difficult conditions. She says it feels strong, but also a little sad. I tell her that history often carries both pride and hardship. As we walk along the Great Wall, the wind moves around us. My daughter says it feels like the wall keeps going forever. I explain that it stretches across mountains and valleys. She says standing here makes her think about time. I tell her that places like this remind us how small we are, and how long stories can last. Back in the city, We walk through an outdoor market. I explain that markets are not only about buying things, but about meeting people. My daughter points to red decorations and asks why red is everywhere. I explain that red represents luck and happiness in Chinese culture. She smiles and says the city feels colorful and meaningful. We see people practicing calligraphy outdoors with water on the pavement. My daughter asks why the writing disappears. I explain that the practice is about movement, not keeping the words. She thinks for a moment and says, that is like learning without holding on too tightly. I tell her that she understands more than she realizes. In the evening, we walk through a wide public square. I explain that public outdoor spaces are important in Beijing. My daughter says people seem calm even when there are many of them. I tell her that sharing space with respect is something this city teaches quietly. On our last day, we sit on a bench outside, watching the city move around us. I ask my daughter what she remembers most. She says she remembers how people move slowly in important places. I tell her that this is how culture shows itself through everyday movement. As we prepare to leave Beijing, I hold her hand. I tell her that cities can teach us without speaking. She nods and says she wants to listen better when we travel next time. I smile, knowing that this journey has already become part of how she sees the world. This is how our journey through Beijing feels open, thoughtful, and alive in the spaces where history and daily life meet.